Good morning, everyone. It's Lee Henson, President and Founder of AgileDad, and it's time for today's episode of the Daily Stand-Up. Without any further ado, let's get started. It's Tuesday. Another wonderful week has begun. Today, I wanted to talk to you about improving your backlog. So, what are some tips you can give? So, this is the question we received. What are some tips you can give for how to improve your backlog prioritization so that you can have maximum impact? So, I'll give you a handful of tips here. Coming in right at the top, I'm going to say, don't be afraid to ask why, and don't be afraid to say no. Oftentimes when stakeholders give us things and they say, oh, I need you to do this, right? You're going to receive 100 requests for every single thing you get. It's okay for you to say, well, why is that important? Who's our target customer? What are we trying to do? And it's also okay for you to say, no, compared to everything else right now, I don't think that's one of our top priorities. Or, no, that's not our top priority right now, but I think it's a good idea. It's something that we can get to in the future. I think too often we get caught up in the yes man or yes ma'am syndrome, if you will, and it makes us say yes to everything. And if everything's important, then nothing's important. And your backlog prioritization suffers greatly as a result. Next, I want to make sure that we find a way to treat defects as part of the product backlog. So I think that if you're talking about defects, and of course, I'm a big fan of a technical debt sprint, but every now and then you get something that comes in that needs to be the first item you address as part of your next sprint. And when that happens, it needs to be treated just like a regular story or backlog item. It goes in through the product backlog, it gets inserted into the sprint. And it's amazing to see that, so many people try to treat these as 0-point items or as items with no earnings for doing them, so to speak, right? I think you need to treat the defect just like you treat everything else. If you treat it like a normal backlog item, then when it comes in, you know how to handle it, you know what to do. It becomes a routine. You're not trying to separate and do things differently, which I think is incredibly important. Third thing you can do is avoid doing any stories that don't have user value. So I think a lot of times we get a list of stories that we need to do, and we look at them and we're like, how does this impact the end user? And it doesn't. And if it doesn't impact the end user, if it doesn't provide value, we probably shouldn't be doing it, right? At least that's what Bill Wake said. Independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, and sized appropriately, and then testable. So that's invest, right? But I think that if you're doing technical stories and they're not providing value, that tells me you probably shouldn't be doing those technical stories. Now, here's a clue though. If you're doing a story that's technical in nature, but it provides a long-term solution to something, even if it's not providing immediate value, it does provide user value. And it's something that you should definitely look at and be forward-facing because it's going to help us be more maintainable. It's going to help us with a future update. That provides value. That's good. I just don't want you to sit there and question yourself and say, oh, wow, I don't know how this is going to optimize anything. If that's the case, it's usually not a good idea. Next is don't be afraid to write a hypothesis. Creating hypothesis is incredibly important. In fact, I teach this in my advanced product owner class, that everything that you should do, if you're not sure, write a hypothesis. Something that's quantitative. If not, you can do qualitative, but something that you can quantify. But talk about what your expectations are. Don't be afraid to explore. Don't be afraid to go in and try to critique the story. Make sure you're clear on acceptance criteria, you know what's happening, and you're in a good way, right? And I think that if you do that, that's going to help you really understand better and prioritize your backlog, as long as these things are time boxed, right? Time box research. And then finally, rely on your BAFATA. So as a product owner, your BAFATA, business analyst, functional analyst, and technical analyst, should be there to support you and provide you with valuable information. If the business analyst is focused on consumer needs and they're providing you with enough information to understand whether it's a must-have, should-have, could-have, or would-like type item, if your FA is focused on high, medium, or low priority with the understanding that priority does not equal importance, that priority equals urgency, and your technical analyst is good at putting a t-shirt size on some things, at the end of the day, what you wind up with is a triangulation factor that's going to help you get an objective stack rank. And once you have that objective stack rank order, then it becomes easy for you as a product owner to sort through, tick some things off, and get alignment in your backlog. So you can constantly improve your backlog going backwards by making sure you have a BAFATA that's informed and you understand what each one's responsible for doing and that you're following through. That you're creating hypotheses regularly for things you don't know and time boxing research around those hypotheses to prove or disprove the hypothesis. That you're avoiding putting stories in that don't contain any value, because that's important. That you're treating defects as part of the backlog like they normally should be done. And finally, that you're making sure that you're asking why and saying no often, so that you have some sense to what you're trying to do, sense and sensibility, right? Because I think that's important. That'll do it for this Tuesday. I hope you have an amazing week. I hope you kicked off your week good. As always, we encourage you to visit agiledad.com, where you can learn more about this topic and others. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.